Leprosy, otherwise known as Hansen's disease, is one of those diseases we recognize from reading in the Bible, but we probably don't know much about the disease. Is it still around? Is it still a problem in many countries around the globe? Joining me now to talk about it is Danny Yohannan. He's the Vice President of Gospel for Asia. Danny, welcome to BCN.
Thank you. It's good to be here today.
What is the Gospel for Asia all about?
Gospel for Asia started as a small prayer meeting actually in my parents' living room about 40 years ago. And from that small prayer meeting, God enabled us to be able to help literally hundreds of thousands of people in kind of lifting them out of their poverty, to be able to help tens of thousands of children to be able to go to school, to have a future, but then also to be able to bring the love of Christ to literally places that have never heard about Christ. Very often, some of our people will go to villages and say, "Excuse me, do you know Jesus Christ?" And the answer oftentimes will come back something like this: I've lived here my whole life. Your friend Jesus is not here. Maybe check the next village down that road and you'll find your friend Jesus there. And so our heart and passion is to know Christ, but then to also make him known, not just in a word, but also in deed, which is what we do to be able to help lift people up out of their poverty and help them have a future.
Danny, we often don't hear about Hansen's disease or leprosy in North America. Apparently, there are 10 to 20 new cases annually in Canada and up to 250 cases each year in the United States. But in many Asian nations, there are more than 200,000 new cases each and every year.
Yeah, it is quite shocking. It's one of those things that is just out of sight, out of mind. Just because we don't see it, we kind of imagine that it's not happening. It's kind of like modern slavery. There's more slaves today than many times any other time in history, and yet just because we don't see it right in front of us, or we are not in the place to acknowledge it, it's something that we kind of push away. Leprosy is one of those diseases that we hear it, and it causes us to get a little bit scared, but we don't realize, like you said, there are cases here, cases in Canada, but primarily places in South America and Africa and Asia, which you have hundreds of thousands of cases. We typically use the term Hansen's disease here, so people don't hear the term leprosy. But I believe one of the reasons why we don't pay attention to it is because the numbers are so small. Like you said, 20 and 10. It's so small compared to the population that it's almost a non-issue. But when you come to places like Asia or Africa, you're dealing with a shame-oriented culture. And so the reason why it compounds is people don't want to let anyone else know that they have leprosy because it's shameful. And so they kind of hide away until it's too late to actually get any treatment or help. And that's why you see these ginormous numbers of hundreds of thousands of people contracting leprosy. And that is kind of an unfortunate thing to see, where there is help and treatment, but the shame that comes with it is exactly what you see in the Bible, where people were shamed and isolated because they have leprosy.
Can you explain exactly what leprosy or Hansen's disease is and how do people actually get it?
Leprosy is a infection where it attacks the nervous system, and it affects the nerves. We usually think of what leprosy is like. Leprosy causes your fingers to fall off, or your nose, or you get injured in some way. I believe it was Philip Yancey who co-authored a book called The Gift of Pain. And in there, the doctor was explaining an event that happened in his life where he realized what leprosy actually does. It doesn't just cause your limbs to fall off. He was trying to open a door with a key that seemed to be kind of stuck. And so this little kid who had leprosy came by and said, "Let me try." And so he turned the key until his hand started bleeding, and yet he was able to open the door. And what the doctor realized is leprosy attacks the nerves and destroys the feeling, where you end up injuring yourself. And so just imagine if you did not feel a pebble in your shoe and you kept walking and walking, walking, you would tear a hole through your foot. Or if your back was out and you kept walking in the wrong way, you would injure yourself permanently. This is what happens to people who who have leprosy. That is destroying their nerves, where they burn themselves and don't feel it. They injure themselves, they don't feel. They cut themselves, and this is why you see limbs missing and fingers missing, because it's continually they're hurting themselves. And so leprosy is a bacteria that can be transmitted usually through an open wound. And funny enough, armadillos, which we have plenty of them here in Texas, actually carry leprosy, but it's
Wow.
quite difficult to catch leprosy. Think about this: Mother Teresa spent majority of her life working among leprosy patients, and she didn't contract leprosy. So, as long as there's proper hygiene and care given to open wounds and not, cross contamination, it is one of those diseases that can be prevented, and you can work among leprosy patients with no difficulty. But the real issue is when it attacks the nervous system, if treatment is not given quick enough, that is when they begin to injure themselves over and over again. And then you get infections, and then it's a compounding effect. And that's why it's such a devastating disease, where you have people hiding away and not wanting to let anyone else know. And then it gets worse and worse and worse.
And we read in the Bible that people with leprosy were treated as outcasts. Danny, is that still the case today?
It is very much the case today. I believe one of the reasons why, and I'm speaking as not an authority on this, even in the West, why do we call it Hansen's disease? We go by the official name because if you were to walk down the hospital corridor and hear that someone had leprosy, everyone down that corridor would get scared because even today with all the technology and all the knowledge and education, we still cringe at the idea of leprosy because it's a death sentence. It used to be a death sentence, especially back in the Bible times and for many years before they found treatment. But in many of the places in Asia, since it is a shame oriented disease that it combines with a culture of shame, people are isolated by their friends, their family. They lose their jobs. They become outcasts. The only friends that they can have is the other people who have leprosy that they are living with in these leprosy colonies. Gospel for Asia, with our field partners, we minister to hundreds and thousands of these leprosy patients that are put away in these camps. And hopefully there is some family members who care enough to actually bring food to them. But it is one of those devastating things. Not only are they isolated, but very often they will go for many, many years without people actually embracing them, touching them. They have little or almost no human contact in terms of touch because people are so afraid to even touch them.
Does this shunning really cause someone with the symptoms of leprosy or Hansen's disease to keep that secret to themselves and not maybe seek help?
Absolutely. It is one of those things where if you are afraid of losing your job or afraid of bringing shame to your family, you're not going to say anything. I'll give you an example. There was a man who I believe had cancer in his body, and there was no possibility of being healed by any treatment. And so he decided to take a long walk and drink some poison and commit suicide. And we would hear that and say, that's a terrible thing. But for him, it was a situation where his family will be left for caring for someone who they cannot find healing or hope. We're going to spend all the money, and the rest of the community will say it's because of some curse that's come upon him because of something that happened in his family. And so he decided the less shameful thing to do was to commit suicide. While he was on the way to commit suicide, someone gave him a gospel tract, something that tells people about the love of Christ, a little pamphlet. And so he decided, might as well read this before I end my life. And there he read about Christ, the God that loves him. And there he gave his heart to Christ, committing his life to him, and God healed him of that cancer. And today he is sharing the gospel in the same place that he came from. In the same way, many people who have contracted leprosy, it's such a scary and shameful thing that they wait and prolong anyone else knowing about it. And so by that time, oftentimes, treatment is basically trying to maintain rather than trying to heal or prevent further contamination.
Danny, in its early stages, antibiotics apparently can cure leprosy. Is that true?
It is. If someone will catch it early enough, if they go to the doctor early enough, there is treatment to be able to help people who have contracted leprosy. But it goes back to the issue of people waiting till it's too late because it's connected with I don't want anyone else to know, and it's a shameful thing. But this actually has to do with more education and helping people to recognize the possibility of getting cured and healing, and showing them that can actually restore honor back to them rather than living in shame. But it is really a combination of medical help and the education side, and bringing hope and healing, and also helping them to understand how Christ loves them.
Once the disease is actually set in, though, is there any hope of a cure after that, or does the leprosy just continue to get worse?
The leprosy continues to get worse, or it will be slowed down. And a lot of times, you can help as much as you can by keeping wounds clean. If they've lost, fingers or toes, that they have, special shoes that is made especially for them, that kind of doesn't rub against the wounds. And you got to, you have to have a lot of help and care, and taking care of the wounds and being very careful, because like I said before, if you don't have feelings in your limbs, you end up injuring yourself. So you have to be very, very aware. Within our ministry, we have the Sisters of Compassion, which is these wonderful ladies who have committed their life to either help in the slums or help with children or help in the leprosy colonies. And so often you see these amazing women going and cleaning the wounds of these beautiful people who have contracted leprosy, and telling them how much they love them, and they do this in the name of Christ. They go and help clean their homes and feed them and help them with giving, their bath and giving them dress. Basically, you have to have someone kind of help take care of you. Otherwise, it's just it's a disease that debilitates the person until they basically cannot help themselves anymore. It's a terrible disease.
We read in the Bible that Jesus healed lepers. Danny, have you seen healings of leprosy in India?
We have actually seen quite a few people that have been healed of leprosy when we were able to pray for them. And so you see there's different types of healing that takes place. There is a supernatural healing that takes place where you actually see people cured of leprosy or cured of other diseases. It happens all over the place where the gospel is being presented. But you also have the healing of people's hearts. We actually have churches that are in the leprosy colonies, and people without fingers are clapping their hands and raising their hands to Jesus, and they're worshiping and partaking of the Eucharist together. And so brothers and sisters who don't have leprosy worshiping together with those who actually have leprosy. And so it is a complete healing of their hearts, not just their bodies. But we do actually see God answering prayer, and it's so exciting to see God answering prayer to supernaturally heal many of them, but also to see that there is joy and hope and healing in their hearts, and they're smiling on the outside and on the inside of their hearts, even though they may be suffering with the leprosy. But is joy to see that our hope is in Christ.
Danny, what's the response from those who receive help and acceptance from mission workers?
The response is amazing. People's hearts are very open to any encouragement, any medical help, any education help. One of the things that we do every single year is called the Christmas Gift Catalog campaign, where we help people with items that help them break out of the cycle of poverty. And part of that help and healing is to help people in either the slums or leprosy colonies, to be able to help not only with education, but items that can actually help their life become better. And it's one of the things that is just so common whenever we help someone with like a water buffalo or a Jesus well, a clean water project, or helping someone clean their wounds. They often ask, why are you doing this? No one touches us. Why are you doing this? You're touching our wounds. You're cleaning our wounds. Why are you doing this? Why are you giving us this water buffalo? And this is what we tell them. It's because we love Christ, and we want you to know that Christ loves you too, and that what he has done for you. And literally their eyes will start to water, and they weep and cry. They have not experienced love in that way. Remember, very often they go for such a long time without anyone talking to them, without anyone embracing them. And now someone not only is embracing them, cleaning their wounds, but we care for them tangibly, practically, and we become the hands and feet of Christ to them. And it literally just breaks their heart and melts their heart. It's amazing to see what God is doing.
So, how can our viewers specifically help those afflicted by Hansen's disease or leprosy?
I think there's probably two or three things that people can do, and all of us fit into some of these categories. One is we can all pray. Jesus said, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send more laborers into the field. That is something that all of us can do. I would encourage people to spend 15 minutes a week in prayer. Pray for God to send more laborers, God to do incredible things on the mission field around the world. If we don't know what to pray, use your internet, your radio, your newspaper, if people still have newspapers. and use those as sources of prayer requests. When we see something happen in another place, pray, God, break my heart with the things that break your heart. As Christians, we should be aware of what's happening around the world, and we should be praying and fasting for God to be doing something. Second, I would encourage people to use their social media, not just for bad things and discouraging people, but look, I mean, we can let people know, hey, I just learned this new thing about leprosy, and I learned this new thing about Hansen's disease. Get more people to be praying, get more people to be aware of this. I would encourage every church this Sunday to spend 5 minutes during their Sunday service praying for those who have contracted leprosy or those who are working among leprosy patients. Third, I would encourage people to go to GFA.CA and learn more about what Gospel for Asia is doing to combat this disease of leprosy. On our website, we have plenty of stories, videos, things that will encourage your heart and help you to realize that things are going in a way that is making a difference. And so people can go to GFA.CA to learn more and be encouraged.
It's a great way to wrap it up. Danny Yohannan, Vice President of Gospel for Asia, thanks a lot for joining me today from Texas.
Thank you. It's my privilege.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.